Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the garden. So as you can see, we have some snow on the ground right now, which is highly unusual for South Carolina. I think the last time we had snow accumulate on the ground was January of 2022. So it's been about 3 years since we had snow on the ground. And as you can also see, we only have a little teeny tiny bit, only in the shadiest areas of the yard. You can see that the snow actually stayed on the ground, because what happened was it snowed for like half a day and then it got warmer and it started raining on top of the snow, and that started melting a lot of it. And then of course, there's so little of it that by the time the sun came out and it got warm the next day, it just all started evaporating and it was mostly gone. And right now it is definitely above freezing. It's about 39-40 degrees Fahrenheit, and I anticipate that we'll see a lot more of the snow melt off today as well. What's interesting is that I think very little of what I have out here actually cares about whether or not it snows. As you can see, there's still like a ton of green poking up everywhere. Snow is actually not any worse than it just being normal cold. And in some places, it's actually better. In places where you can get like a layer of snow that kind of stays put for a while, it acts as a little bit of an insulated blanket for your plants, which I think is really cool. I don't think that's ever going to happen here, but the snow itself is not like an extra bad problem for the garden or anything. It's just kind of there. Sometimes ice can be a problem for the garden. Especially if it's going to accumulate on branches and make them heavy and have them fall down and stuff. So that can be a little bit of a negative to having snow. But again, here, it's not a super big concern. Like, check out this lettuce right here. It is actually looking really, really gorgeous in the midst of all of its little ice. It is fully adapted to the cold at this point. And so are most of its buddies over here. And then once you get on to actual brassicas, the amount that the cold affects them is even less. This is, I think, a Brussels sprout. You cannot tell that it got snowed on at all. This leaf is probably already yellow. These leaves turning yellow, especially at the bottom, generally doesn't have to do with cold. It just has to do with the fact that they're old leaves at the bottom that aren't really needed anymore. We've got another little brassica here. Actually, this is two. That's a Brussels sprout and a random something that grew along with it that I'm not really sure what it is, but it kind of looks like a really bright green kale to me. So we're leaving it to see what happens. Kohlrabi here, looking pretty good. And as we keep coming down here, there are little garlic sprouts coming up everywhere. This right here is a garlic sprout. Garlic, I said this last week, I think, it is like one of the hardiest things to grow over the winter, at least for me. I've never really seen any sort of weather conditions give it any trouble, and it comes up, as you can see, this mulch here is pretty thick. It's like twigs and leaves. And I didn't clear it away from the bulbs at all. I just kind of stuck them in the ground. And they come up through this stuff pretty much no problem. I mean, look at these chunks of wood that are around here. I've never really seen anything give garlic any issues. And down here at the end, I still have not harvested my teeny tiny broccoli. I really think I should, though. I've been given a lot of grace time to get it harvested, but if you look really close, you can see some of these little bits of the floret are starting to open up into actual little flowers, and that is not what we want. If you didn't already know, broccoli, this is the flower of the plant, like before it actually flowers and opens up. So the harvest window is when it looks like it's as big as it's going to get, but before it actually starts, like you can see the texture is already getting quite loose, loosens up, and actually flowers. And it's a little sad that it's so tiny, right? But, at least we got something. And this rutabaga here, I meant to pull it last week and I just never got around to it. Maybe we'll pull it this week and get that boiled up and mashed. Cabbages are looking incredible. They don't care about the ice on their leaves at all. Look at that. This guy is doing great. Really like sturdy feeling leaves on it too. The Brussels sprouts, they're looking about the same. In general, they've not been quite as healthy as the cabbages, and also not growing quite as fast as I would like either. I struggle with Brussels sprouts here in this climate. But you can see they're starting to make little sprouts right there where the leaf connects to the stalk. That little bud right there, that is what becomes the Brussels sprout. So we're likely going to see some sort of harvest off of these plants, but it's not going to be massive. And if we check on all the little onions that I've planted throughout the garden, these guys are pretty hardy. They're slightly less hardy than garlic, I would say. These are starts of annual onions, and you can see the top of this leaf here is all brown and stuff. It's hard to know how much of that is just from when it was like shipped and most of the foliage turned brown, and how much of that would potentially be due to it being unhappy with the cold. But what we do is we look at the newest leaves, right? And that one looks generally pretty green. It's got a tiny bit of a purple at the tip. That could be cold related. But generally, if the newest leaves look good, I am not really concerned for the health of the plant. We've got the volunteer, whatever these are, brassicas, which I've been thinking are broccolis. And so far haven't seen anything to indicate that they're not broccolis. But nothing to positively identify them as broccoli either. But they're all looking really good. They're very close together, right? And that normally would not be how I would do it. But they all decided to grow here. So I'm going to let them. And maybe we'll see a little bit of a surprise harvest off of some of these. Sometimes I look down at the weeds on my ground and I'm like, if it wasn't for the random patches of ice, I could convince myself that this is like fully warm spring. And this green in particular, actually, I've talked about it on the channel before. This is chickweed. It is an edible weed, which is why I'm not like super concerned about yanking it out. It is a really good, solid ingredient. I mean, it's not like the tastiest edible wild green that you could have, but I like continuing to have it. It feels like it's a really sturdy plant. It grows everywhere. It's so easy. Like, I haven't done anything to encourage this beautiful mat of chickweed. And if I need the food, I have it. Plus, it's a native plant that is functioning as ground cover in my garden, and I really like that. I have been wanting to get more living ground cover so that I don't have to worry so much about mulching every single year, because that's exhausting, and it can be expensive if you don't have access to free mulch like I do. And so getting native plants that are edible and also ground cover, I mean, it feels like a win-win-win situation. And plus, I didn't even have to work for it. It's just there. The raised bed section looks a lot snowier than the main garden just because the house shades it from the sun for a lot of the day. Looks like Feverfew is not enjoying the cold. Definitely isn't dead, but I expect I will see a lot of the leaves kind of die off. They're looking kind of wilty from the cold. However, Sage, as always, couldn't care any less. Same with the oregano and the thyme. The only thing that seems to affect thyme is like the intense heat and drought, like what we had over this summer. But yeah, these plants are looking great. Not much to see over there. It's all been mulched over and put to bed for the winter. I do have kind of a funny story about my carrots though. Before the snow started coming in, I think this would have been like a few nights ago now, I was getting some carrots out for dinner, and I realized that the ground that they're in was frozen solid, like ice, like hard, like cannot move it, like block of ice, hard. And that's probably because it's so high up off the ground. I would not expect my main garden ground to freeze, not when it's, you know, barely getting into the like high teens, low 20s at night. But this ground, it makes sense that this would freeze because it doesn't have the thermal mass of the rest of the earth kind of heating it. And so I was trying to get carrots out for dinner, and I could not get them out. And so I had this stick, and I was like chipping away at it, trying to get the carrots out. And I had a friend coming over, and I was like, what am I going to do without the carrots? It's like one of the main things. And then I had the bright idea to heat up some water on the stove. I did not like boil it, but I got it like warm-ish, like, you know, feed to a baby warm, and poured it over the ground and melted it just enough to get the carrots out. And hopefully that didn't like thermal shock the carrots that I'm leaving in the ground. You can see, you know, the foliage doesn't look like the happiest, right? But there's definitely still some like very healthy looking carrot foliage in here. So I have still some live carrots, and that's good because I want to leave some of them to go to seed for next year. So some of these will stay in the ground over the summer and make some seeds for me. But yeah, I don't know, it was pretty funny. Frozen ground is not something that I have to worry about around here, like pretty much ever. Over here, I think it's even more obvious. The fact that the shade is the reason that the snow is still on the ground over here. And this is actually a very interesting illustration of where the shade hits my garden, because you can see there's still snow here, but the shade has moved on, right? Because the sun is behind me, and it is going from this side of the sky to that side of the sky. And so this was shady, and it is fairly shaded. There's also some trees here. Let's turn around. There's some trees up in here, like this one will shade it pretty well while the sun is going down over here. So this only gets a little bit of sun in the middle of the day during the winter. And you can see all the shade here. Like this is, especially closer to the house, mostly shaded for most of the time. So I might even see a lot of snow back here for a few more days yet. It'll take a while for it to actually melt. In this sad raised bed, we do still have some carrots. And I think the beets are technically still alive. But I don't really know if they're going to be any good. They've just been through a lot, and the soil has been really, really disappointing. I specifically wanted to come over here to check on my citrus, because out my window it looks pretty darn sad. And you can see this leaf right here, not looking great, but we do have green leaves on it still. This guy isn't dead yet. Man, if it makes it through this winter, I'm gonna be so surprised and happy. And then if it makes it through the winter, like maybe it'll make it through the next winter and the next winter, because it's only gonna get more robust as a plant, right? We'll see. You know, citrus in South Carolina, it's a big if. But I'm excited, you know, because I looked out the window and I think I saw this leaf and I was like, oh, that's not a great sign. We still got a live plant, so I'm gonna be happy with that. As a quick check-in also on the mushroom logs that are newly inoculated, I still have yet to put up the video that I made for you guys about these. It's just one of those ones that I haven't gotten to at the holidays. But theoretically, the cold temperatures should not be really affecting these guys at all. They are newly inoculated, so they're not going to be as robust against super cold temperatures as a fully inoculated log would be. But also, the winters here are super mild. I mean, the coldest that it is supposed to get would be 10 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Which is not bad at all. And we've got, theoretically, citrus living through the winter here. So, these logs are probably doing fine. I mean, it'll be probably many months until I have any feedback at all on whether or not these things properly colonize. But for now, I'm not super worried about these logs getting snowed on. Actually, the slow release of moisture is probably a good thing for these, because keeping them moist while they are doing the initial inoculation is something that I've realized is very important. So letting the snow do that for me is pretty convenient. Alright, so I brought you guys inside because one of the things I want to check in on during January is I want to talk to you guys about how I'm still using food from the garden even in January, and kind of what that looks like and how much of it I have left. Right in front of me, I still have some holy basil from right at the end of summer. This is fully dried and it probably needs to be put up, but it's one of those things that it's fine the way it is, and other things can take priority, and it's gonna be fine here. If I want to make some tea, I can just crumble some off into a cup and go from there. Up here on my shelves, this is the jam shelf. You can see I still have plenty there. I also still have some strawberries in the freezer that got melted back when we had the hurricane and the freezer went out. I could not move everything into a working freezer, and so some of the fruit got a little melty, and then it refroze when the power came back on, and that's fine for jam. So I still have a pretty large amount of strawberries that need to get made into jam, in addition to everything I have on that shelf. So I am solid on jam for the year. That jar right there is green beans. They are packed in salt, and I have yet to get them out and actually try them and see if this preservation method worked, not only in keeping them preserved, but also in keeping them tasty. Up here I have some tomato products. So this whole section is tomato sauce. This is not tomatoes. This is those trepadera peppers packed up like peppadews. And then I have 4 jars of curried tomatoes. This is mint tea. And then up here, this is all salsa, and I have 1 jar of diced tomatoes left. With the sauce that I make, I generally use it exclusively for pizza, just because I think it's really delicious, and it makes homemade pizza feel extra special. I could be using it for spaghetti and stuff like that, but I'm not actually that big of a fan of spaghetti, and in other stuff where tomato sauce is just one of many ingredients altogether. I feel like the flavor gets lost a little bit, and so as somebody who can make a decent amount of sauce but not a ton, I generally just use the tomato sauce for homemade pizza, where I feel like the flavor can really shine. I have only a few of my onions left. This is all of them here, and then this is some dried peppers that I've got here on the wall. So not just a ton of onions left, but I use a lot of onions. And so the fact that they've lasted me this long is pretty great. And let's see, looking at it, I will probably run out before I harvest in the summer. That's still like at least 5 months away. So we're not very close, but I'm pretty happy with how they've lasted me. The only thing is I would like to have more, just so that I can actually make more things like onion powder, because right now I've only barely had enough for fresh use. This wall right here has more drying peppers, drying herbs. This right here is the rest of the garlic that I have left. I had not quite enough this year, and so I've already planted what I think will be enough for next year. I planted 100 cloves of garlic, so we'll see if that ends up being enough for me for next year, because I also didn't get to make garlic powder this year. Some of these peppers are just dried out so that they can become powder. Some of them are going to become chili oil. Some of them are going to stay whole and dried and get toasted for chili powder on demand. We've got, I think that's more holy basil lemon thyme, curry plant, and I think that one's also more holy basil. Something I do have a lot of right now is my sweet potatoes. Most of them are under the house in the crawl space for storage, but I'll pull a few up here to just have on hand and not have to go all the way into the cold outside to cook dinner, especially because I'm often cooking when it's dark out in the middle of winter. But I do have like 2 big boxes of sweet potatoes down there. My regular potatoes, as normal, have already been sprouting for a while now. Hi, Kata. And these ones I haven't touched in a while just because I normally would be saving them for planting. I probably will keep planting these pretty purple ones, even though I'm transitioning over to more Jerusalem artichoke, which is like so much incredibly easier to grow than potatoes. But, I mean, these purple potatoes have just been so pretty. I don't think that I can fully let them go. I probably will let these other types of potatoes go. You can see, again, I've got a ton of the little tiny ones left that have all started sprouting. And I think I would be planting these out in March or so. So these are just kind of in storage for planting at this point. And speaking of the Jerusalem artichokes, I do have some of those in storage in the crawl space as well. They are packed in slightly damp sand in a 5-gallon bucket in the crawl space. And I've been eating those little by little. I didn't have just like a ton of them, like I had way more than I expected from the teeny tiny plant that I had. But it's definitely not like, you know, a huge like eat this every week during the winter kind of harvest. So I've just been kind of eating little bits here and there. Next year, I do plan on having enough to eat it regularly like potatoes over the winter though. My spice rack also holds quite a bit of stuff from the garden. Let's go through what we've got here. This dried ginger root is stuff that I grew. We've still got onion powder from last year. I've got a bunch of my green dried herbs in here. This Carolina cayenne, that's from my peppers and all ground up. Sugar Rush peach is also mine. The fermented Tabasco powder is from last year, actually. We've got some mushrooms, dried mushrooms in jars up here. Those I use a lot for stalks. Some dried sweet peppers still from 2003. Purple dead nettle, that is a native weed. Anything else up here? I've got some feverfew tincture from those plants that I grew there. There are a lot of spices that I can grow. There are even more that I could be growing that I haven't like started growing yet. I'm never going to be able to grow everything that is on this spice rack. Just because some of these things like cinnamon, for example, like that's never going to be something that I grow myself. Other people can do that in climates where cinnamon likes to grow. But like a lot of this stuff, I think I will be able to get like 60-70% homegrown spices in here in a few years. Cumin is one of those ones that I want to be able to grow, that I have tried growing and have failed at growing over and over, and I can't quite figure out why yet. It should grow in my climate, but I just haven't really had success getting the seeds to germinate consistently and like actually grow into plants if they do manage to germinate. So that's something that I'm gonna keep continuing to tackle because I go through a lot of cumin. When it comes to the freezer, there's not just a whole lot in here. I've got my peppers that I grew. I've got Buena Mulata and fish peppers in here. I've got some dried ginger, not dried, frozen ginger that I grew. And I've got a little bit of pesto in here. That is my melty strawberries. And that's just about it for the freezer up here. And downstairs, I actually don't have that much either. I might have more pesto in there, but really, I did not fill up my freezer quite as much this year as I did last year. I had way more pesto last year, or maybe this year. I just went through it really fast. I don't know, but it feels like I had a lot less. Last year I tried freezing green beans. I did not do that this year. And I also had a lot more eggplant in the previous year. So I had frozen baba ganoush, frozen ivar, both of which I made this year from the little bit of eggplant I did have, but, you know, sadly ran out of that super, super quick. If we look in the pantry, mostly what we'll find in here is beans. I've still got a few fava beans in here. These are noodle beans. These are those blue cocoa beans. And then this jar back here is older blue cocoa beans. And that's actually all the beans that I have currently. I think I had more last year. These are not like pumpkin seeds that I grew. I did not grow any pumpkins this year, but did dry out and save the seeds for roasting. I am done with my popcorn that I grew myself, and this is unfortunately store-bought. And while we're in the house, I might as well give y'all an update on what I'm doing indoors in January. I actually just the other day planted my ginger, and these are each in their own like kind of big individual pot because I hope that they will get like, you know, decently sized before I plant them out in the spring. And I've started them in January because they take forever to germinate, like a month or more for some reason for me. So I just start them quite early. If you look farther back here, I also have a chunk of my lemongrass that I saved. I had to dig that out and replant it because it will not survive outside over the winter here. My bay leaf is also indoors because it will not survive the winter. And then up here, I have planted rhubarb. It has not sprouted yet, but we have 4 rhubarb plants hopefully coming soon. So one last thing before I go, I want to remind you guys that I have launched a new sticker for Q1 on my Patreon. It is this one right here. If you haven't seen it yet, this was designed in colored pencil, if I can get it to focus, by Alana, who is a 13-year-old girl who lives in my neighborhood. And I think it's very, very cool. Like, it's definitely unique. It's not the sort of thing that you would normally see, but I think it's really, really cool. And I think it's really cool that she wants to be an artist. I think it fits in pretty well with some of these other stickers I have. Not all of these are mine, but this one is from the channel, that one's from the channel, that one's obviously from the channel, and I've got them spread out over my other seed boxes. But yeah, check out my Patreon if you haven't already. Go check out Alana's sticker. And very soon I am planning on doing a planning live stream like I did last year, where I will plan my garden with you guys live on camera so that you can see my entire process and what I go through. It's going to be kind of different this year, and I actually am really, really excited about it because it's going to come with an announcement of something new that I'm doing that I'm like really, really looking forward to telling you guys about. So keep an eye out for me announcing that once I know the date for sure. And I hope that all of you will come see me for that. And in the meantime, I wish you all happy gardening, and I am super excited to get started and get into gardening again in 2025.